Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up.
We are not barbaric. We are not terrorists. We are not criminals. We are human beings.
A new video shows a peaceful handover ceremony of Kiwi pilot Philip Mertens. Also,
not all organizations are financially healthy, so they're susceptible to bribes, corruption from outside.
the threats to press freedom in the Pacific, and later on, transshipping of fish costing Pacific nations. New video footage has been released showing a peaceful handover ceremony of New Zealand pilot Philip Mertens in West Papua, who was held hostage by the West Papua National Liberation Army for 19 months. His release comes after a disputed claim of a bribe and 6 months on from the group saying they intended to release him. Alicia Foon has more.
The videos show a formal ceremony followed by Philip Mertens shaking hands with a number of locals before entering a helicopter. Mr. Mertens, a father and pilot, was released from captivity on Saturday after more than a year and a half in West Papua, a region fighting for liberation from Indonesia. Located just over 6,000 kilometres north of New Zealand, West Papua is the western half of the island of New Guinea, bordering the independent nation of Papua New Guinea. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon says he has written to his Indonesian counterpart and thanked all those involved in securing the safe release of Philip Mertens.
But it wasn't just the good people at MFAT and other agencies, there were many other people involved. In Papua there were the churches, local politicians and civil society representatives who all worked relentlessly on this case. And I note that Philip's family have also placed on record their appreciation to the hostage takers for keeping Philip safe throughout this long saga.
A former New Zealand police negotiator, Lance Burdett, told Midday Report international negotiations are complex because there's no direct communication link between the hostage takers and negotiators.
Ultimately, the freeing came down to money, and usually it does come down to something simple like that, but it's a complex pathway to get to that point.
West Papua Council of Churches, Reverend Sofian Socrates Yomans, has been part of early negotiations and is in close contact with the family of Mr. Mertens' captor, military commander of Free Papua Movement, Egyanis Koigoya. He says Mr. Mertens' release was peaceful and an act of goodwill, saying the capture was politically motivated and not about money.
No bribe, no bribe. This is political mission. That this is the kindness of the Egyanos. Release the Martin, Pilot Martin. This also telling the publicly, internationally, telling that we are not barbaric, we are not terrorists, we are not criminals, we are human beings.
West Papuans have been seeking independence since the 1960s, following the controversial transfer of the region to Indonesia by the United Nations. Reverend Sofian Socrates Yoman says it's time to wake up to the issue of West Papua.
West Papuan people struggling, fighting for more than six decades for justice, peace, independence, liberation. We struggle continually. And we need international communities, including New Zealand, communities and governments. Listen us, our sovereign. They will listen our sovereign.
Green MP Tiana Tuiono has been vocal on the liberation of West Papua.
The international community has been complicit in by not paying attention. It's a wake-up call to resolve the situation, to support the self-determination of Indigenous peoples in West Papua and encouraging the Pacific Islands Forum to actually do more to get a UN human rights investigation team to go in there, preferably with Indigenous peoples, to support what's happening over there and to push Jakarta to do more. Move towards a peaceful resolution in West Papua.
The Pacific Islands Forum has been approached for comment.
Financial and political pressure, bribes and self-censorship are among the greatest threats to press freedom in the Pacific, according to a new survey. The inaugural Pacific Freedom Forum Index surveyed over 70 journalists and media executives across 14 countries. It was launched this week on the fringes of the Pacific Media Summit in Niue. Pacific Freedom Forum Chair Robert Ironga spoke with Moira Tule Patela about the survey.
We spoke to 73 people from 14 countries across our region, and the key finding is that the report found that financial pressures, economic challenges is basically one of the main things we found. that not all organizations are financially healthy, so they, regarding such situation, they are susceptible to bribes, corruption from outside, so it will affect the freedom of expression. And the other thing we found is there's cultural issues that people are not free to report on issues regarding the families, politicians who they know or they're related to, because Pacific is such a small community, so that too is a threat to media freedom in our region.
So what's the next step for this?
The next is we look at the reports, and then we are planning already for 2025 to do another index. We're going to broaden up the questions, and of course we are looking at including more people, more than 73. But the basis, we believe, is that regardless of how many people, the results will always be the same. So we are calling on partners, on regional journalists, that will be teaming up with them again to ensure that we have a good respondents to our next survey once it comes out.
And when you saw some of the results from the survey, were you surprised at all?
I was surprised, especially in terms of the cultural aspect of it, because I didn't expect freedom to be affected by this, because I believe that we should be going over that, but the Pacific culture is very important, and it remains important. And the other thing that I was surprised with is the financial aspect of it, that some governments actually favor other people, favor other newspapers, favor other radio organizations, because the others publish stories that probably they don't like. So they don't give them financial advertisements, which is the survival for any organization. So there's some bias by certain governments towards certain organizations. That's what the results also show.
Did you feel hopeful at all after reading some of the results from the survey?
Well, I'm very hopeful, because out of this report, then we can work together as a region, as a group of people who have interest in the media, to talk to governments or to improve on some of the recommendations that the report suggests. And I am hopeful that by the next report there will be some improvements, or if there are no improvements, maybe in 2 or 3 years' time we'll see some differences.
An academic doubts George Speight will seek to involve himself in Fijian politics after being released from prison last week. That's the view of Victoria University political scientist John Frankel after Speight jailed for leading the May 2000 coup in Fiji. Speight held the country's Prime Minister Mahendra Chaudhry and dozens of others captive in the Parliament buildings for 56 days. He was last week granted a pardon and released after 24 years in custody. Don Wiseman asked John Frankel if he was surprised by this development.
No, I mean, I think this came up last year as a possibility. He's been in prison 24 years now. You know, most of the conspirators of May 19th, 2000 were released after only 1 or 2 years, including Ilisuni Lingaere, who was Speight's right-hand man. I think there were 2 others, Josefa Nata and Timothy Silatolo, who pleaded not guilty, and they got very long prison terms. But they were released last year. So it was always likely that Speight would be released, but that Speight's release has certain sensitivities attached to it, particularly as regards the military, because, you know, he is in many ways symbolic of everything the military were fighting against when Bainimarama was in power. So that made it a little bit difficult. But no, I think most people think the time has come, although it has raised some concerns in some quarters.
I guess the question is what the military think.
Yes, and there hasn't been any explicit announcement, but nor should there necessarily be. I mean, after all, I think John Karaniwai, the current commander, has steered clear of making too many media statements. He's got a better relationship with the Home Affairs Minister, Pio Tukunduadua, than Bainimarama did before the coup. I think he's got a better relationship with the Prime Minister as well. And let's remember also that it wasn't just George Speight that was released, it was also Shane Stevens. Now, Shane Stevens was the leader of the mutiny in November 2000. That's a few months after the May 2000 coup. but it was very much linked to that coup, and it was a direct attempt to, it was a mutiny within the military. It was a direct challenge to Bainimarama's authority. But the current commander, Jono Kalaniwa, is very keen on making it known that he's his own man. He has been engaged in reconciliation efforts across the military. He sees there is a Truth and Reconciliation Commission going in the broader country at the moment, but I know that the commander sees reconciliation within the military forces as being the first thing to do, and then seeking some kind of broader reconciliation. So I certainly hope that the Attorney General and the Minister of Home Affairs and the Prime Minister have consulted with the commander of the Fiji military forces beforehand. I suspect they would have done.
Yes. Would you expect the general public to have anything beyond a curiosity about his release?
Certainly, there are a lot of people in Fiji who are less than 24 years old, or who were children at the time when George Speight did what he did, and they probably won't have that much knowledge of it, although they lived through the consequences of it in many ways. Older Fijians, yes, sure, there would be. I don't know whether one can talk about a general public in Fiji, because the attitudes seem to be so strongly differentiated still on ethnic lines, especially in the older generation. But amongst indigenous Fijians, I think there would be a strong sense that the time has come to turn the corner and that there should be some degree of forgiveness. After all, 24 years, nearly a quarter of a century, that's a very long time. And there is a strong sense of Christian forgiveness, particularly in the ruling People's Alliance Party, as well as in the broader indigenous community. I think in the Fiji Indian community, the reactions are more mixed. There are many that also see this as time to turn the corner on these dreadful events of the past 25 years. There are some who think that conditions should have been imposed on George Speight, such as that he doesn't stand for public office and such things. But I suppose that there are some also who interpret this as one amongst many things that show the government is persecuting the Fiji Indian population. But the more sensible voices, I think, don't look at it in that way.
So would you think he might look at a political career?
I doubt it very much. I heard one post this morning suggesting that he was going to become Prime Minister. I really don't think so. But who knows what role he might play in the future. But I don't think he has his party, the CAMV, is completely gone. I don't think the People's Alliance Party would be receptive to including him in their ranks. I don't think we're in the sort of conditions where a new radical nationalist party is likely to emerge, nor do we know anything about George Speight's own political disposition, whether he still supports politics of that kind. I've heard that he is a devout Christian. Most of his family is overseas. I've been told that he had a marital breakup within a year of going into prison. So his life has been completely transformed, in many ways probably ruined as a result of what's happened in prison.
A report released by Pew Charitable Trust on transshipment of tuna has found that the Western and Central Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organisation is on the losing end of the multi-billion-dollar industry. Transshipping is when fish are moved from one fishing vessel to another ship instead of being unloaded on land, and has a reputation for facilitating criminal behaviour. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
Global commercial tuna fisheries are valued at more than $40 billion a year. About 6.5 billion of this is coming from transshipped tuna from the Western and Central Pacific Ocean. Rihanna McKinney from Pew Charitable Trusts says because transshipping often happens at sea, away from authorities, it can lead to illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing.
Oftentimes when we talk about transshipment, we get this unsavory note because of the lack of controls in place.
She says every other regional fisheries management organisation in the world has updated its transshipment measures, except for the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, or WCPFC, which hasn't made a single change for 15 years.
WCPFC needs to update their measure to make sure that those activities are happening in a very well-monitored and transparent manner so that consumers can feel good about the products that are making it to their table.
Purseine vessels do the majority of transshipping tuna, but this is normally done in port where it's well monitored, unlike longliners which primarily do it at sea. Longliners in the Western Central Pacific Ocean only have 5% observer coverage. It's observers' jobs to ensure fishing is above board. Carriers and Purseine vessels have 100% observer coverage. McKinney says scientists are calling for observer coverage on longliners to increase to 20%.
20% is certainly not the A-star Gold Plus number that I think a lot of people would hope for, especially environmentalists, but 20% is the bare minimum that would be needed for a lot of the current assessments that WCPFC scientists are currently doing.
Ms. McKinney says electronic monitoring using cameras would also help improve monitoring, but regulated standards need to be put in place first.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, sui fua.